Hello, welcome back to Sterling Armory Sword Talk. Let me fix our banner here real quick. There we go. We have a fun topic today, and we're bringing on Colton and Josh in a sec. And so we're gonna try to keep it short if we can tonight. But Matt Easton released a pretty good video on some things that sword reviewers tend to overdo or tend to maybe look too far into that may not necessarily mean or equate to quality in swords, and so we're going to touch on that tonight. Talk about things from a maker's point of view, but it's because it's a good topic, and I do see it a lot in reviews, and I get where Matt's coming from. But he did say some things that were not quite right, so we're going to talk about that today. So joining us now, Josh Warbear, Warcock, Colton.
Nice. He's back, baby.
Oh,
Yeah.
War Curb.
So
War
we're
Curb.
We want to start with some introductions, starting with the War Curb.
Sure. So I'm Colton from Copperthorn Customs, sword maker. Like to make all sorts of stuff. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok under Copperthorn Customs, and then also Sterling Armory Facebook and Instagram page.
Awesome. And the J Warbear.
I'm Josh Warbear. You can find me on Instagram at Warbear_Armory or on Facebook at Joshua Von Warbear. Forgot for a split second. I just had a shit ton of Panda Express and I am loopy. Just
Orange chicken high.
Yeah.
orange chicken. I got
That's
double
good.
orange chicken and then a third meat.
I just
Was
got,
the third one orange chicken?
No, it was Sweet Fire.
Okay. Oh, that's
Sweet
good.
Fire
That's
chicken
good.
breast. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I like that one.
we're gonna hear some
Yeah.
gas from this.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to put you on mute. You know.
Oh, you missed it.
Ooh.
You missed the
Yeah. And again, I'm Chris Fields with Sterling Armory, and I make swords as well. Aerospace engineering and swords are my fun hobbies and work and jobs. And I'm half asleep because I've been working all day. Out at the
Did you
Space
say
Center.
war?
Did I
I thought you said war. Did you say war or work?
work? I don't know. I'm half asleep right now.
It was like impressive.
Working.
Impressive.
Work, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, fun topic today. We're gonna dive into. I think we all talked that we want to keep this one short today because we're all.
Yeah.
I'm half asleep. We have to be up early for work, but this could go for a while because it's an interesting topic. Real quick though,
We'll have to
before
do
we
a part 2 if necessary.
start- True. Drinks. What are we drinking? I need some like NyQuil.
So, I've just got a Arnold Palmer's, so nothing crazy.
Nice.
In a can? Who makes that in a can?
Arnold Palmer spiked. I don't know. It's just is what it is. I
don't
just
think it
buy
works.
it at the grocery store.
Boom.
I
That's
don't know.
pretty good. I've never seen that here in Florida. Maybe I just missed it, but
I don't know.
Uh,
It's delicious.
I am. So Josh, Josh, you were with me, right? When I bought all that. I got 2 cases of Winter Jack because I finally found
Yeah.
it in the local
Yeah, you
store.
cleared them out. All but
Sweet.
2 bottles.
Yeah, so I got. Well, I bought 24? No, more than that, right?
24 bottles?
Yeah, that's more than
Damn.
that. It's 26 bottles, I think, total, right?
Okay. Whoa.
Yeah.
There's
Um,
13 per case?
Yeah, or no, there's 14 per case. So
28.
see, I'm tired.
If I'm out mathing you, you are very tired.
Oh man,
I think
Yeah.
if that happens, you could challenge him for head of NASA.
I'm new head of NASA.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
No,
It's just something crazy like a spelling bee.
Yeah,
I can't win a spelling bee. I'm the worst at spelling.
Yeah,
no,
no.
wouldn't- yeah,
I
don't-
lose on purpose because I think it's funnier.
Yeah. But so how many do we drink during the show? Like at least 4 bottles, right? So I still have a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
bottles, but hopefully it'll carry me through the whole year. I probably need 1 more case.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and I'm drinking in my Space
Nice.
Nug.
Nice.
Space Nug. And Josh, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Joker glass full of vodka,
Oh, I don't
That-
believe you.
and
Is
it's
that
not
purple?
water.
That's
that
what's
purple
your
vodka?
face. Oh yeah,
Smooth.
that looks very smooth. Yeah,
It's just water.
I totally
I'm sorry,
believe you,
guys.
obviously.
I didn't want to like the perfect. Chris will back me up on this. He's a scientist. The perfect equation ingredients for the shits is orange chicken and vodka,
That's true.
or any alcohol, regardless. You just,
You're not wrong.
you know,
Yeah.
the wormhole opens up, so to
You
speak.
got to
and
make it through
spills all the
at least half an hour. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
All
got
right.
that passing out. So Matt Easton put out a great video, and I understand where the video comes from because I think there was a trend in sword reviews on YouTube, and I think initially a few folks that were really good reviewers hit certain points about swords, and then I think every reviewer since has been thought that those are the right points, so they're hitting those points over and over and over and over again for every sword review. And so what I think, and I don't think anyone's talked about this yet, at least I haven't seen it posted. So like Peter Johnson did a very long reply per point to Matt. But again, Peter didn't really address this point, I don't think. And that is swords are, the qualities of swords, whether it's fit and finish or how it's done or rippling in the blade, all these things are very culture dependent. So if you look at historical pieces, like, some cultures did measure the fineness of their blades based on the fit and finish and how there was no gap in the guard, and then how smooth the surface is. And the biggest culture that did that was the Japanese culture. And so they're really particular about those details. But the rest of the world, or most of the rest of the world, is not particular about those details. So Peter Johnson's correct in talking about European swords, where it's like, look, so let's go point by point, right? So, and I'm struggling to remember all the points, but so the first thing was gap, at least the first one I'm remembering, it's probably not in order at all, is the gap between, or any gap
shoulder and cross
between the cross guard and the blade. And Matt was correct in his original point. Like historical swords, especially Western swords, like there is no standard, right? It's all over the place. You can have some guards that are fit very well. You can have some guards where it is the original guard for that sword, but it looks like it was slotted for a completely different blade because the guard slot doesn't match the blade at all. And the fit and finish is all over the place. So some guards, there's such a gap between the blade and the guard that it's like, how would that even work? Even if it was, pressure from the grip. So they're just all over the place. And I'm not sure why. Yeah, I'm not sure why quality, or when you look at historical pieces, like if we're just looking at the gap in the guard, I'm not sure why it's not standard, like why it wasn't always done a certain way. But every smith is doing it their own way, right?
Right.
For some reason, the closeness and having no gap there just wasn't important in much of the Western historical pieces that I've studied.
I hesitate thinking like you've got in the olden days, you've got Roderick Ball Scratcher, getting his guard fit, seated onto it, and then he looks at it and they're like, good enough for who it's for. But using that same logic, some of the swords that were made for kings were kind of shithouse too.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I don't even think they looked at it. Right. I don't think it was something they even considered.
Right. It's like, fuck it. That's awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
And like this, this is a genuine question here. I mean, a lot of the time, the blade and all the hilt components were made separate, correct? Like you have actual blade smiths and then hilt. Anyway, so it's like they may have already had hilts that were somewhat generic that they were ready to throw onto a blade, correct?
Maybe.
And so then you're getting into just kind of, I mean, you've got two different people working up different stuff, and it's just like.
Yeah, I read very much the same thing the other day where they're saying that a smith would have made a blade or a bunch of blades, whereas the guard and the pommel would have been made somewhere else and then just shipped them all in.
Yeah,
which is crazy. Like in my mind, I'd never thought of that. In my mind, I'm like, this smith is in the medieval times is definitely making everything in his little hut from beginning to end. And
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, they shipped in parts. Huh.
Yeah.
That's kind of
They Amazoned
takes
it.
the fire out of it.
Yeah,
They Amazoned it. Yeah.
Yeah. You typically have your blade maker, right, who just does the blade,
Mhm.
and
Right.
your cutler who does all the hilt parts,
Mhm.
and then then somebody after that would do the skyward and everything else. But the cutler, so I actually don't know if they would do parts without a blade like ahead of time. Maybe they did. I don't know the answer to that. That'd be an interesting thing to try to figure out. It seems
Totally.
like they did, or it seems like maybe they made a part for one sword and
Yeah.
it's not working, and they used it later on, right? I mean, we would do
Yeah.
that today, so I don't see
Totally.
why they wouldn't
Yeah.
do that. So guard, fit, and finish. I think they're. So if you looking at different cultures here. So I have historical experience looking at Japanese blades, Chinese blades, some Indian blades, not many, but some, and then European blades. And the only culture there that cared about fit and finish of having no gap in a guard or anything was the Japanese.
Japanese. Yeah.
But again, the swords were their religion, right? I mean, they are a
Yeah.
very big part of their religion, and they spent a lot of time perfecting every tiny detail of their katana they possibly could. Excuse me. Whereas the other cultures, like they didn't care. So I think as long as it functioned,
Right.
and it wasn't rattly or wobbly or
Mhm.
could be fixed in field service, if it got loose.
Yeah.
I think that's all they cared about is did it work, But that's my opinion. But they certainly, you can see a huge difference in historical guard gaps. So the way we do ours, and I think
Right.
we all do it the same, right, between the three of us.
Yeah, I believe so.
So we press fit our guards. I used to do a compression fit from the back. So I used to compression fit everything, and my guard without the grip would be loose on the blade. And I used to do that for a while. And then I did a few press fit ones just because I wanted to do it, and I felt it would be a stronger connection and more reliable from a long-term use point of view. And I liked it, so I kept doing it over and over again, and it worked. So I stuck with it. I know one of our sword reviews, I think that was done by Kyle.
Smith.
Yeah, Kyle Smith. Sorry, I was blank on your last name. He made a comment that my fit and finish on my guard was better than Albion's, and I was like, "Whoa, hold on!" Like, no, it's not.
Whoa.
I said, maybe
You don't want Michael Sigmund showing up on your
Right.
doorstep.
Yeah.
What the hell?
But I was like, look, maybe on that one piece it was really good, and I do remember that piece was really good on that one. But overall, because my guards aren't cast, right? We don't actually cast our guards; they're all hand done. I can't get that perfect every time, and most of the time it's not that perfect. But I guarantee you it's not going to move, and it's going to last the lifetime of the blade. So yeah, like I think we all do it pretty much the same way, and that's why I think our guard gaps are pretty tiny for the most part, and I think they're really good. But that's because we're specifically press fitting our guards. So
Yeah.
and I mean, historically, I think they did that as well on a few. Actually, there's a. Let me use this piece as an example. There's a piece. I want to say it's in the Met. Yeah, I think it is, where you can tell that the blade swells significantly, like just before the guard, and then through the guard, and then it kind of tapers back towards the pommel, and before it goes into the pommel, because the grip is gone. And so you can tell that guard had to be kind of forced in place to make sure it fit there. So you can tell that one was most likely pressed on.
Right.
And I thought that was cool. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way to do it. Did everybody do it that way? Nope. Can you make a good sword that isn't done that way? Yep. So,
Right.
yeah. So that's gap in the guard, right? So rippling. So the other one, the big one that I think. So Matt kind of erred on this one a little bit. He said, rippling down the blade. It's not a. It's definitely not. He's right in saying it's not a definition of whether or not a sword is good or not. Like if you look down your blade and you see some rippling on it, is that a big deal? it's not a big deal. If it is a big deal,
No.
then you have to ask yourself why. Where he was wrong though is he mentioned that he thought that rippling was due to forging instead of machining, and that's where I was like, wait, no, that's not right. So,
Right. Yeah.
So us as makers, I used to hand forge everything, and when you forge something out, you can actually get a pretty relatively smooth blade, but you're grinding off a huge chunk of it after you forge it anyway, because you got to get your forge scale off, and then you got to clean it down to some good steel before you heat treat. So all the rippling is, I would say, almost, I don't say 90%, but at least 80% is in the grinding itself. And so I replied to one of Peter Johnson's posts there saying, like, I can actually, if I know who's doing the grinding, I can usually tell what size wheel you're using,
Right.
and how fast you're grinding, right? So, or if your belt's worn, as Nathan from Arms and Armor pointed out too.
Arms and Armor.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but that's a good indicator for me. I mean, hopefully I don't wait that long, but if I'm short on belts and I start doing my grind passes and I look down and it's super ripply, I'm like, all right, well, this belt's killing me here, so I gotta replace my belt. I don't like to hold.
Mine was speed. Mine was speed and confidence. Like, I'd notice, like, usually on my left side, approaching at this angle, I would get a nice clean grind because I was really comfortable and confident pushing it straight in. I think Matt Stagmer talked a bit about confidence being key when grinding. And I was not so good with the right side of the blade, and I'd notice a lot of rippling there. And it was because I was taking my time approaching my my 10-inch wheel, pushing down nice and slow. And as I did that, I would get a rippling where the material would just bounce a bit. So the minute I started moving a lot faster, the cleaner grinds I would get with less rippling.
Yeah. So, I was looking at some of Colton's just because it was fun to do, and Colton's yours are pretty darn flat, man. It's not much rippling there at all.
Oh, but that's not always the case. But that one I remember was particularly good.
Yeah. So I'm trying to find one of mine that's mine are still just out of the case from the run fair, so they're all covered in stuff. This should be a relatively decent one, but I got to wipe it off on my. Can you see all the hair on it? I guess I really can't.
I see some ripples.
Yeah, there should be slight ripples, right? I always get slight ripples.
Make it bigger.
It should be very subtle. Actually, I can't tell because I'm so far away from the camera.
Make it bigger. Enhance.
How do I enhance?
You
make your screen bigger.
Oh, yeah. Is this it? Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
Right. So,
oh, look how hairy that bastard is.
Can you tell it's hairy? I can't.
I can just see the reflection of your beard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see my face.
Still kind of.
I mean, that looks pretty good to me.
Yeah.
So, like in a Japanese blade, that would be considered way too wavy, because they're hand stoning that flat, and they're doing that on purpose because that's part of how they view sword making, right? It's their culture and how they want that blade to have zero rippling on it, right?
Yeah.
So let me get back to, how do I go back to normal? There we go. So, but so I can look at this and say, well, compared to what I used to do, it's pretty good, but I can still tell, like, if I'm finishing it on my 8-inch or on my 10-inch, or so the small. Just an FYI for everyone watching. So usually the smaller wheel that we're grinding on will leave more ripples. Usually, especially if you're grinding pretty slow, you're going to get you'll get
tighter packed ripples.
Yeah, so the bigger a wheel is, the flatter it's going to be. And the reason why the Japanese blades are so flat is because, one, they don't use wheels, right? Because they hand carve everything, right? They forge it, and then they use those flat stones and run it on a table and just run it flat. So there's no. It's really difficult to get a ripple in there. Or not difficult.
Well, yeah, I don't know if difficult is the right word, but just like it's a flat surface going onto a flat surface, it's just extremely time consuming. So it's
yes, very much so.
Unforgiving. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like wrong angle of approach, and it's like, oh crap.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, it's just a different way to do it. But those who talk about rippling a lot are those who come from like a Japanese background. So like Matt Jensen talks about it all the time, and I think that's where a lot of people get it from. Is from Matt is because he's coming from a Japanese background, so it makes sense for Japanese blades. So those are the points that you would look at from a Japanese point of view, which is what he's doing. He does translate that to the European blades, though, but he also says, "Hey, I'm not a European sword guy. I'm a Japanese guy, so keep that in mind." So yeah, but I think a lot of people take that and run with it. So like sword rippling, I mean, obviously it can be very bad, where if the sword is like really wonky, then yeah, but I don't think
not enough to affect performance on any level.
No, like I'm trying to think if I've even known of even a low end maker that has put something out that's so wavy that I would consider it bad because of that, and I can't think of one. Of course, I don't hold many low end pieces, but
if I would have had one, it would have come from a flea market in South Georgia, and it would have cost me $14 for the classic red and black Ninja toe.
Nice.
And that was probably nice and flat too, right? Because it was done on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, honestly, it seems like the super cheap ones are actually kind of more of your perfect finish because they are just being either stamped out or
so
it's just like
plate, right, with no actual branding on it, right? Just,
like no tapers, like nothing's there. It's like literally just stamped out, polished, you're good to go. And it's like, of course it's perfect, but it's not what you want. So
and the other I'm trying to remember the other point. So the other point was symmetry. And I really like this point. So I think Matt is correct on this, and I think Peter also agreed. And I'm not sure. I don't think I've actually seen a reviewer complain about symmetry in the blade so much. Maybe someone has. And I'm not sure where that one comes from. But yeah, so one of the things and the reason why I like hand making stuff and not doing production runs is because I always make sure, like, even if I machine something, I always go back over it by hand, either on the grinder with, holding it by hand, or actually using hand sanding, just to make sure it looks hand done and it doesn't look machined.
Yeah,
sure.
And I think what they were saying is, if you have something that looks too symmetric, then obviously it would stand out in a museum, right? It would be like, wait a minute, that looks weird. So
yeah,
and but I think you mentioned like Albion's look. I'm not sure if he said this exactly, but I think he was kind of saying it like Albion's, because they're done on a CNC, that means they look too perfect. And I don't think I agree with that entirely, because Albion's, all their base work is done on a CNC.
Yeah.
But then they have to go back and hand grind it. And Josh, you've actually hand ground an Albion blade, so it's not easy. So, I think the overall look of the blade, that when you get I think I have a couple over there, it looks hand done because they have to go back and hand finish it.
Correct. Right? Yeah. The Albion blades that I've been working on, like, we're talking ripples. It's all the striations from the tool marks where the carbide bit is cutting it out, and shaping all the bevels.
You have to get all that off.
Because it's just like micro circles, just every like couple millimeters repeating each other. And when I first got the blade, I was like, okay, cool, that's interesting. Like, it's a lot of work, but it kind of looked cool, so I was like, maybe I'll just leave it. I don't know. But people have to go back in the minute they base them out, just like you're saying. They go back in, they lay hands on it, and then I hesitate to use the term human error. You know what I mean? Because the Albion is pretty close to perfect as you're going to get. But it's human error. It's where we are not symmetrical. We are not machines. Human hands get put on it. That means somewhere you're going to be able to see a flaw or an asymmetry, which, again, doesn't affect anything, unless you're looking for it, and that's what you want to gripe on. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. In fact, I was actually thinking when Matt and Peter were talking about that, I was kind of thinking the opposite. I was like Albions. So I think sometimes they look a little too good in the hilt, like the guards and pommels, because they're cast from waxes that are really well done waxes. Their parts are coming out very symmetric and very very crisp looking. much more crisp than you would see in a museum piece. And so I think the blades look more hand done than the hilts do on Albion's. So that would be if I were to criticize at all, which I wouldn't, but if I did, I would say the hilts are a little too perfect. But,
I mean, that's a good criticism to have, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
You're too good.
Yeah. Well,
Right. Yeah.
So and I'm thinking of that like if I were to see it in a museum next to an original piece, right? Could you pick out a modern made piece there? And so I would say it's less with Albion's. It's less on the blade. You probably couldn't tell the difference between the blades, but I think you could tell on the hilt pieces. So
yeah, on cast
items.
I
mean they're cast, right? So it's going to be roughly this. They do have to hand grind it after the casting as well, but not as much as the blade.
But they're so close that it's almost like a buffing rather than like grinding into shape.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
Although I would be curious to know how because I don't know if their original waxes are hand carved or if they are CNC'd out. I think they're CNC'd. I think.
Interesting.
I don't know. Maybe a good question for Mike. I'm not sure.
It makes sense if they were CNC'd with the mass that they do.
Yeah.
But buffing, they definitely do buffing. But as far as like the bronze, the casting process where you've got the stems or the veins going down, they'd have to remove those and polish those off and even them out as well. So there would be a bit of grit there, but I think mostly it would be just buffing or even popping it in a solution to brighten it up.
So as a good contrast to Albion's castings, Arms and Armor, they also cast
Arms and Armor.
Well, but their castings are directly off original pieces, right? So like a lot of their guards and pommels, I don't think all, but a lot of them are cast off original pieces. Now the only downside of that is you're casting the original piece as it is today.
Right.
And so we don't quite know what it looked like when it was new. So there could be some erosion and some
generational loss.
Yeah. So so they do look a little more worn, and Deltin does the same. If you're familiar with Deltin,
super blurry. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Blurry. What's happening?
I don't know.
You're moving too much.
You and your expensive cameras.
I know. Yeah.
So
I'm perfectly grainy the entire time.
This is me now. I dropped down to 480.
You're like a drunk filter on a video game.
Yeah. So
true. Flashbang.
Yeah.
So, as another example, I don't have an Arms and Armor right here, but I have the Deltin. Yeah, I'm ignoring you.
Yep.
But casted part. They're not cast off an original, but they're cast similar to it, and they're very pitted and very not uniform, right? So very different looks, but it just looks like a piece in a museum. You guys got it normally too. Okay.
Budget. No, as Colton, he keeps dancing, trying to.
It won't focus. I don't know what happened here.
Yeah.
Our next point scabbard fitting.
That was in the video, but
yeah. So
we kind of talked about that last time.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, and then for guards and pommels for us, like we don't cast, we don't machine, like CNC machine. Everything just like our blades is hand done. So, so that's why they look kind of unique. So,
right.
So scabbard fitting. Is that gonna work? Your hands in focus. Maybe.
Right? I think
that looks better. You look good now. Yeah, good.
Of course, I always look good. What are you talking about?
Yeah, man. You're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue. I'm done.
Scabbard tightness.
Scabbards. Yep.
So Matt was, I think, again, that's another point where he's right on. Although the only thing we can't say is we don't know how they were originally. So
right. Yeah.
We know what we have now. We have no idea, but I think he was pointing out that there's even some paintings and stuff where, in the Western world, your sword doesn't seem like it had to be a tight fit because there's some paintings where like the sword's upside down and it's falling out of the scabbard clearly. So,
right. Yeah.
So odds are it probably didn't have to be tight. Plus, when you're on campaign, like say you're a knight and you're out, and it's especially in England, and it's raining all the time. if your sword is tight to your scabbard, even with a lining on it, and then it rains, well, now your sword is so tight to that scabbard and it's not coming out.
Or like Gladiator, the frost makes the blade stick.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you probably don't want a tight fitting. Now, again, this is another cultural thing, right? So in the Japanese world, do I have a katana? I don't. So in the Japanese world, they specifically shim their scabbards, or am I blanking on the Japanese name right now?
Saya?
Yeah, saya. They shim their sayas to fit tight because they have that extra piece there, right? Which is the habaki on the Japanese blade. You know, some Chinese blades have habakis, kind of. They're not really. They don't really function the same. But you know, the Japanese have that extra part on the base of the blade so that you could fit that scabbard. Well, it's not just for that, but because of that piece there, you can snugly fit your scabbard just to that part. So the blade's not tight to the scabbard, but the habaki is. So again, it's a cultural thing. No other cultures that I'm aware of do that. So yeah, I don't think you'll see tight fitting scabbards on most Western people. But today, if your scabbard's not tight fitting, they're like, "Oh, this is crap."
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's kind of, and this is, I think that's the point of a lot of this is like, that's what we're taught. And the same kids, they're taught about the blood groove, you know, and the purpose of the blood groove, or, you know, the term battle ready and all that, you know, a rat tail tang, or that we're taught, and we're so excited to absorb the information. We don't really care if it's true or false. And we want to sound like we know what we're talking about. So we can't wait to go to our friends as teenagers or some adults and go, dude, did you know this? And, you know, and it just kind of perpetuates it. Enough people believe it. They don't know that it's a lie or that it's false. You know, they're just like, oh, that's cool information. Nice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And as far as scabbards go, like, I looked at that, and like spaces between the guard as well, you know, in the blade, as well as the tightness. I looked at that as like a personal failure and annoyance when I first got started into sword making. I was like, God damn it, you know, you get to seat the guard. The guard's awesome. It looks good. You tap the blade. It has a nice ring to it. Then you put it in, and then you lay your strip of poplar on the back of the tang to draw your line, and it just sits off the side of the poplar by like 2 degrees, and you're like, that means the cross guard's not straight, son of a bitch. Or that works perfectly. And then you get into making the scabbard, and you wedge it, the poplar, much like the tang, you wedge the poplar across the blade into the guard. And then you go to trace your outline, as I do. I trace my outline on my poplar, and I look down, and the blade's off by like, you know, a 1/4 inch. And you're like, that means the blade isn't straight, or the cross guards aren't straight, and that means you can only put the sword in one way correctly. Otherwise, the blade binds if you flip it.
Yeah.
So that was my rant. Sorry.
No. I mean, that's all really true stuff, and that's why scabbards are hand done to the blade. And if you have a generic scabbard on a generic blade, those tolerances for both of those better be pretty good, or else it's not going to work.
Right.
So, and you know, a lot of our custom scabbard makers have said, like, I can't make standard scabbards for even Albion blades, even though they're machined, because it could not fit from one to the next.
Yeah,
so there's a big tolerance there,
based on a degree or a couple millimeters here and there. You know?
So do we hit all those points? So we hit gap in the guard, rippling in the blade, scabbard fit and finish.
He had mentioned like alignment of pommel.
Oh yeah.
Pommel alignment.
That's something that a lot of people may not know. So in a lot of historical pieces,
I didn't know about it until the article came out about like the Viking pommels and how there's an argument over whether they're purposely misaligned to hold the grip.
Yeah. So
I was like, that's interesting. That's what I'm going to tell everyone now.
Yeah. So on a lot of, yours is perfectly flat there, right?
Hopefully.
So if you were to hold a blade in your right hand, right, and I were to, actually, I'm going to keep the scabbard on because this one's sharp. So, if I were to twist my right hand slightly, it would be a more comfortable grip, right? If my hand was on the pommel, and I just squeeze tight, it would force that pommel to twist that way. And there's a lot of original European blades that have that pommel slightly twisted that one way. And they're all done the same, like almost the same angle too. So it's like, that looks like it's intentional. So Either
Yeah.
that, or they've been used so much that with enough hitting and twisting and using, remember the tangs are very soft on original blades. So
Right.
you could, if you hit this enough times and your hand was on the pommel, you might bend it yourself.
Get a little
That could be
creep, little
Yeah.
creeping.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, that's very common on original pieces, and it's common on pieces that are, you can tell we're not even finished yet. So you can tell it was being built to be crooked.
Huh.
And so yeah, the question is like, well, is that on purpose? And it seems like it was, right? And it makes sense to be more comfortable for, when you're swinging it. So especially if it's a really big pommel. So
And
I would say though that I don't think modern makers, especially mass production makers, I don't think they try to make crooked pommels. I think their goal is keep everything straight. So
I certainly have never tried to make a crooked pommel, but I've definitely succeeded in making a few, mostly due to my bullshit vice being off a degree when securing it down and then not even thinking about it until you put calipers on it and you're like, that is off a full degree. And then you're spit grinding it which way or the other to try and throw it out.
So next time you make one that's tilted to the left, then you've made
It's
a left-handed
purposely.
sword.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. I'm going to tell people from now on. That's more expensive. It's $30 more expensive because I had to
This is the
purposely
left-handed
calculate
model.
a crooked tang recess.
Yeah. And I think Matt was saying that there was so you'll see that a lot of, not a lot, but I saw that on a few Chinese blades. Now on the Chinese blades, you don't really know, like, is that just it got messed up after the fact? It probably wasn't originally made that way type thing. And then I think he said some Indian blades were done that way. And then a lot of later cavalry sabers, like it's kicked off a little bit depending on how you're using the saber. But yeah, like, so for us, I'm actually curious for you guys, because I know I do this on accident sometimes. So like when you're because we're press fitting the guard on, that means the tang thins as it gets towards the end of the pommel, right? And so sometimes I'll mill this out and forget that I thin the tang out. So I'm milling at a 1/4 inch, and I'm like, oh wait, my tang is now thinner than that. So now I usually mill one size down on the pommel, and then file it out if I need to. But if I forget and I mill it too big, or if I'm doing 1/4 inch and I overdo it on accident, then the pommel's loose on there, even though I meant it to be tight. Right. And so I have to, like, as I'm peening it, I'm like holding the pommel in place, like don't bend, and then peening it.
Yeah.
So. Oh yeah. So it's a little tough to get right, but once it seats, it's fine, right?
Yeah, because then it's kind of bit into the steel and locked in.
It's forced. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mechanically edged it.
I have had to hold a few like lined up, because if I were to just let it go, it would misalign itself, because mine sits on an angle on my vise, which is probably not the smartest thing. But I have the table underneath it, so if a sword's too long, I can't stand it straight up. I have to have it at an angle. And so I'm peening from an angle, and if I let that go, it's just going to droop, right? So
same. Yeah, I got mine at an angle as well, for long blades. But yeah, I've had a couple times like that, which brings me to today's sponsor, epoxy resin. What's that? You got some negative space in your blade. Just fill it up with epoxy resin. No. And back in the original day, back in the target day, when I'm doing props and stuff like that, with props, you don't have to worry about it. And this, of course, brings another thing. It's a bit of a biter. Yeah. Does it affect performance for the crooked pommel? No. If your pommel's in danger of falling off during because something's too thin or there's not enough bite on the peen, yeah, absolutely. Finishing it rightly, like that, yeah. But back in the day, I would seat it on there, tap it, and then look at it from the side and go, son of a bitch, that's like an 1/8 to the left, just a couple degrees. Yeah. So I'm like, either I heat up the tang and twist it till it's straight, or I pop the pommel off, find where the actual true lines are, and grind it to shape just like that, which I've done both of. And there's some times where I'm like, it's a prop, no one's going to give a shit. I'm going to fill it full of epoxy resin, so make sure that it stays on there, and then peen it as much as I can. And sometimes I'll force it down so there's extra painting material, and then just mushroom the shit out of it until it covers everything completely.
Yeah. I mean, so you have to do that at that point, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, and I guess I did want to add, because we are kind of nitpicking a lot of these things that reviewers talk about, but I did want to add things that I think reviewers should talk about, and some of them do, but a lot of them kind of miss this detail, or they don't go into it enough. But there's one really good thing I think you can look at to determine if a sword is cheaply made or not, or if it's technically a good sword or not, and that is, if you pick up that sword and the handle itself cuts you because they didn't clean up their edges, so
Yeah.
it's a bad thing. Like, that's not a good thing. And you won't find that on from any decent maker out there, because they'll put their sword in their hand, they'll play with it, make sure it's not cutting your own hands up. So like that. So one of the downsides to one of the only nitpicks I have on that cold steel messer that I got is that they left the guard edges so sharp. Like, if I were to run my hand along that guard, I could easily cut myself on it. And it's like, obviously that's not a good thing. So,
no, you have to champ for all the time. Even if I do a guard that I'm not going to grind an angle on, I still put the Scotch-Brite on there and run it at a 45, like 3-4 times with a real firm pressure, just to make sure it knocks whatever 90-degree angle was there off.
Right. Yeah. So I know, like, in the HEMA world, it's really funny because there was a lot of folks who did not like wheel pommels for the longest time in HEMA, because the wheel pommels they were getting were bad. So they were getting ones with really sharp angles. So when they have their hand down there, the complaint was that the wheel pommel edges are too sharp and it hurts their hand. It's like, well, that's not the fault of a wheel pommel. That's the fault of a not done well wheel pommel. So
it's funny you say that, because I've had a lot of people come up to, like, in Combat Con and booth saying, HEMA people, like, they grip it and then they hold the pommel and they're like, I usually hate wheel pommels, but this one's way more comfortable.
I was like, what's up?
I had no idea that some of them were just kind of dangerous back in the day.
I had one. So I remember that. Actually, I was using one at a Ren Fair a long time ago. I'm trying to remember who it was from. I don't remember. I don't remember who it was. It wasn't any of the more common Ren Fair makers. It was like an off-brand one. But I was swinging it, and after a day of practice, I was like, ow! I didn't even notice it because I was into the choreo. But man, like, I chewed my palm all up on that thing. So I went home and I, used a little Dremel and cleaned the whole thing up, and it was fine. So, but I mean, that's one of those. So that particular, like, either cleaning up guards or cleaning up pommels, if there's a production company just trying to get blades out fast, that's the first thing that they'll drop out of their process, right? Because why do that? Especially if it's just going to go on a wall and that's all they think it's going to be used for. Then they drop that part of the process out. So that's one of the things I think in sword reviews. If you guys are out there, if you're watching and you're a sword reviewer, make some more comments on that. There's a couple makers that do. Like, I know Matt Jensen does really bring that up on every part of the sword as he's talking about it, which is good. But I don't know if others do that. So, so that's I think
cover all of them. Is that all of them?
I don't know. I think it was.
All I remember.
If not, part 2 coming soon.
If we missed anything, guys, the guys watching, if we missed anything, please let us know. But I think we covered everything, and hopefully we're giving you a slightly different perspective. Again, the one thing I don't think people have talked about is, especially the different culture ideals from different, sword cultures and history. Is that Tari? I can hear Tari sneezing. And then, and in terms of modern makers, obviously we're doing things different than they did back then. So, but we try to make it at least look, as close as we can. I think that's it. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, guys.
One more point. Just bringing it up really quick. Sorry, is
no, you're good.
As makers, I go out of my way not to give someone a sword that I think is kind of crappy. I've never made something that I didn't have a defect on, whether it's a loose pommel, whether it's a misaligned pommel, whether it's like a wonky cross, or like something. I've never passed something off to someone without going, this is what I find kind of wrong with it. It's aesthetic. It's purely aesthetic. There's nothing in the handling of it. This is what I find wrong with it. This is why the price is what I think is fair with it. And if you're cool with that, then awesome. You know what I mean?
Well, even from a functional point of view, Josh will remember this one. So I had a request for someone, to make a scythe that they could fight with, like a really yeah.
Oh, Rob.
Yeah.
I love you, Rob.
And at first I was like, I don't know if I could do that, like, because I knew he fought really hard with his weapons, right? And the people he was fighting against also fought really hard. So and they're using pretty significantly heavy swords, doing these shows, and they're not going slow. And so having a pretty beefy chunk of metal that would be safe to fight the other pieces of metal they were fighting, attached to a very long piece of wood, no matter how big that wood was. Like, I couldn't make one that I felt that he couldn't break. Just because they're not doing it's not a historical piece at all, right? He's doing it for stage. They are using him and for an original sword, they abuse them because they're hitting them so hard. And the stage blades they're using are all 3.5, 4 pounds, if not heavier. And to have a scythe go up against something like that, it's like, well, I don't want to give you something I think is going to break. And so I made one, tested it, broke it. Like, well, that's not going to work. Made another one, I couldn't get it to seat right, and it broke it again. So I was like, eventually I was like, Rob, I'm sorry, man. Like, I can't do this.
I'm trying, bud.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
So I told him I'm sorry. Like, I tried to give him his money back. He's like, no. I'll get something different. And then eventually we talked, and I'm got a sword that's going for him. But like, I just from a maker's point of view, we don't want to give you something that is not the best thing that we can do and doesn't live up to what we think you want. And need. So I
think that's the benefit, not only for us, but for our customers as well, is not seeing them as a statistic or a number and saying this is the part of the process we cut out because we have to make this. We're making this first and foremost for ourselves because we love it. So we would make something that we would want.
Exactly. Something we're proud of and we would use personally.
Right. Yep. Personal accountability, quality control through personal accountability.
Exactly.
It's good.
And we don't want anything breaking and coming back to us to have to fix, because that's just not fun. Like, we don't want to have to. Yeah, like, we don't want to do that. We want to make it as good as possible so we never have to see the thing again.
Yeah.
I made probably like
being used, but
10 swords in the very beginning that I just kept on my shelf and never took anywhere to sell because I was terrified that they weren't good enough for people. And eventually I let go of that and was like, you know what, I got to put some out there to test them out. And so far, fingers crossed, nothing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, I think that's a good time.
Good stopping point.
Yeah, we're a little short today. We're almost at an hour. We're getting a little less. So, real quick, if you guys want to give some outros, and thanks again if you guys are still with us. Thanks for staying with us, and we'll do some quick outros and call it a night.
Yeah, cool. So again, I'm Colton from Copperthorn Customs. You can find me Facebook, Instagram, TikTok under same name, and then also Sterling Armory.
Awesome.
I'm Joshua Von Warbear. You can find me on Instagram at Warbear_Armory. Like one of my amazing, highly popular, semi-viral reels. We're sitting at 78.9 million. Fuck that.
Million. Wow.
78.9 thousand views so far. All in Europe. All my likes and comments are coming from Europe. So weird. By the way, cool. And on Facebook, Joshua Von Warbear. Feel free to drop me a line, shoot me a message. I'll definitely answer you and chat with you. I like talking to people.
So someone must have shared that in like one of the big European hubs or something.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, we got to get more
picked up.
Got to keep posting more. We got to cut more and get more videos done.
Yeah,
definitely.
And then again, I'm Chris with Sterling Armory, and again, you can find all of us at our Facebook page, all the Instagram pages, and everything's going to be linked below per usual. And if you're new to our Sword Talk, this is episode I think 18 now.
I think so.
So yeah, all the playlists are linked in the YouTube, so you can go back and look, and we have some other different playlists on the channel as well. And so thanks for joining us, and I'm gonna try to do a proper outro this time because I didn't last time. So So thanks for joining us, guys, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Bye.